Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to a series of videos I'm doing on a book series by Joseph Delaney. The book series is called The Last Apprentice. That's what it's called in the US. I'm trying to think. The British is a little bit different. Now, the author is in fact British. So he's from Lancaster County, which is where a lot of these stories, his fictional world takes place in Lancaster County, England, which is a dark and dreary world, at least in this story series. Now, this book series is dark. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not for kids who are sensitive. Don't go anywhere near this book series. There is a reason I'm covering it from September through November. I meant to cover it just in October, but it's a really long book series. It's 13 books in all, so it takes a while. So I'm starting it here in September, and it should finish like the first week of November, I think, is when I have things scheduled. Again, there are 13 books total, and I think there's a few additions. So I will read off the titles before I kind of go into what this book series. So, and apparently there are two different titles, because of course there is, because the US is weird. The Spooks Apprentice is what it's called in Britain. That's the first book, followed by, which is actually called The Last Apprentice, The Revenge of the Witch in the US. So those are the American copies, are the ones that I'm going to have, but I'll read off the British copies because I think it's important. The Spooks Curse is what it's called in Britain. In America, it's everything has The Last Apprentice attached to it. So it's The Curse of the Bane. In fact, I have a copy of The Curse of the Bane here. So that's what this is. And then you have The Spook Secret, also called The Night of the Soul Stealer. And then the British version of book 4 is The Spooks Battle, which is called The Attack of the Fiend in the US. The Spooks Mistake, which is an interesting title, is book 5 in Britain, and its American title is The Wrath of the Blood Eye, which is oddly enough, as of this video, this last book that I read. So I've gotten to book 5. And yeah, these books come out every year from 2004 to 2014. So the next book, The Spooks Sacrifice, is in the Britain, and then The Clash of Demons. Very, very different titles here, which is very, very interesting. The Spooks Nightmare is book 7 in Britain. In the US, it's called The Rise of the Huntress. Interesting title. The Spooks Destiny is book 8. In the US, it's called The Rage of the Fallen. Again, very interesting thing. This one's, book 9's a little bit closer. This is I Am Gramkin, or Gramklin, and then that's the British title. The US, it's called The Gramkin, the Witch Assassin. So close. The next book, book 10, is The Spook's Blood, which is also called The Lure of the Dead in the US. And then this is a little bit closer. Book 11 is Slither's Tale, and in the US, it's just called Slither. And book 12 is called Alice. In the US, it's called I Am Alice, so a little bit closer. And then the final book in Britain, it's called The Spook's Revenge. In the US, it's called Fury of the Seventh Son. So those are the titles of these 13 books. So this book series follows essentially the apprenticeship of Thomas Ward, who is a 7th son of a 7th son. And because his father, who is a farmer, obviously can't split up his farm, which is relatively common, this is the countryside, the eldest son has to inherit, otherwise the land would be torn to pieces. So basically kept being parceled off. So the father, as is traditional, has to find jobs for all of his other children. So by the time he gets down to the 7th son, there's not a lot of favors left. I mean, he talks about like one goes to the priesthood, you have one that goes to maybe be a blacksmith, and there's a few other different jobs that they can do. As far as I've gotten to, the only siblings that you've been introduced to are his oldest brother Jack, who's married, whose wife runs the farm, and who's going to inherit the farm, and his other brother, who is a blacksmith. So that's the second oldest. He went off to be the blacksmith. So what happens to Tom is he's apprenticed to the Spook. Now, this is Jonathan Gregory. That's his name. Basically, you kind of hear Mr. Gregory's what he's called. You don't hear his first name for a while. And what spooks do in this world is they deal with the dark. So they're the ones who are trying to capture and control witches, bogarts, ghosts, and a variety of other different dark creatures, which they go into. And that is their job, and they have a specific range in which they do it. So Tom goes off with the Spook. He's 13 when he starts his apprenticeship. So he's actually relatively young. So he goes off to be an apprentice. And in this first book, which is called The Revenge of the Witch in the US, he meets a witch by the name of Alice. Now, she's not really a witch. She's a child of witch families currently her parents are dead, and she's being raised by her witch aunt, Bonnie Lizzie, who by the end of this book ends up in a pit, which is essentially what the Spook does with witches. Instead of killing them, he doesn't hang them, he doesn't burn them, though you can definitely do that in this world, because it's fictional, but it's set 1700s, so candles are still happening, and you have blacksmiths and farmers and priests. Yes, they exist here too. They have interesting issues and all sorts of things. So, and that's kind of the round. It's right before technology. Please ignore the cat hanging out on the door. That is Obsidian, who snuck in here a little bit ago before I was closed the door. Just ignore him. He's irritating. And he's technically still a kitten despite how large he is. So please ignore the large black cat. Back to this. So essentially that's kind of the time period. So Gregory basically he puts witches in a pit because they're immortal creatures and they can't really starve. So he puts them in a pit that has iron bars over the top. So, and that's essentially how they're contained. And he has several in his back garden. You find out some very, very interesting things. Now, Tom is not quite sure what to make of this. He's not really happy leaving home, but his mother very much says this is what you need to do. And throughout the series, you find some interesting things about Tom's mom. Yeah, she's the seventh daughter of a seventh daughter and has all sorts of interesting things going on with her. And she essentially tells him, it's like, I bore 6 sons for your father so I could give birth to you. You need to do this job and you need to learn. So that's what she tells him essentially in this book. And this is basically the book series chronicles his dealings with the dark, particularly when you find out, I think, do I have a copy of this book? Yeah, The Attack of the Fiend. So this is, again, these are library copies. I have an e-copy of the first book, but I'm borrowing them from the library because I like these in physical form. So this is The Attack of the Fiend. The Fiend is the creature that, this is book 3. And that's this is the overarching villain of the book. So the first 2 books kind of deal with Tom dealing with some other basically witches and the Bane, which was a god. That's book 2, and priests. I'm pretty sure that the author of this book does not like priests at all. The impression of priests are particularly in this book, The Curse of the Bane, which is a god, medieval god that ends up being locked up. But yes, priests are not highly looked upon in this book series. At least so far, I've read up to book 5. So at this point, so I'm still working on them. So, but the Fiend is this overarching, basically this is the devil, almost to an extent. It's an evil, evil monster that is released. So that's the overarching villain. So most of the main story is Tom trying to figure out how to learn as best he can and eventually defeat this fiend, which is what's going to happen in the final book, which is the British version. The British version, The Spooks' Revenge, or The Fury of the Seventh Son. I actually kind of like the American version better, The Fury of the Seventh Son. But that is the gist of this book series. Now, why this most definitely can be read in ebook form. It works just fine. It almost works better in physical form. I prefer this book series in physical form, partially because they do some illustrations. So, particularly at the front, I think, of chapters. I can pull this up here. Here we go. Open the books here. So, as you can see, they do some illustrations. The other more important thing is at the end of these books, that needs to be so they have the noticing the book is coming apart. Libraries, this will be, when I return it, it will be weeded, taken out of the collection because it's falling apart. The City of Phoenix does not repair these things because it's not worth it. So, but again, back to the book. He has his journal stuff in the back. So it's a visual thing for these books. And I have a cat in a closet, which I'm going to try to ignore. Black cats are irritating. We have two. But that's the reason I really do think these books are an experience when you read, are best read in physical form. So they are really fantastic books so far that I've read them. That's the reason I'm covering them. I found them a long time ago. Just never got around to finishing this series. But again, not for the faint of heart. These are very, very dark. Yes, this is one of those a hero's tale, chosen one kind of stories, but there's a lot of suspense. Tom Ward is not perfect. He nearly dies multiple times throughout these books. He makes stupid decisions sometimes. So he is definitely not always heroic and always wise in his decision making because he's a teenage boy. I believe at the end of this book series he's about 17. So he's still very much a teenage boy, but he learns a lot. This really is a fantastic series. You could probably read it aloud, but again, not for the faint of heart. It occasionally does get gory, not outright gory. There's a little bit of romance between him and a young witch by the name of Alice. And I'm in book 5, so we're getting some interesting things going on. So it'll be very interesting to see how this progresses. And yes, I will cover each book one at a time, similar to my Ranger's Apprenticed series, though I think those are a little bit different because I think I combined books just because they had combined storylines. This one is very much, you start at 1, you finish at 13. You can't go jumping around, and there is a long arced storyline with this book series. So, similar to various other book series, but I am going to cover all 13 one by one just because they're all very separate in their storylines and their points. So that's really it for this kind of introduction. Look forward to, again, I'm going to cover all 13 books this fall. Again, I highly recommend them, but check out the reviews to see if they would be appropriate for your children. This definitely, if your parents are doing homeschooling, because that is my target audience, we are secular homeschoolers. These are fun books to read. There are good female characters, there are bad female characters. There are good males, bad males. It's very balanced in that sense, though again, this is the primary male character is Tom Ward. But these are dark. It covers, it looks a lot at old British folklore and monsters. So again, witches, ghosts, demons, trying to fight the dark. That is the overarching theme of these books, but they're not for the faint of heart. They are good to read if you're into scary stories. So, yeah, if you like the idea of this book, be sure to check out the rest of my reviews of this book series. I will link the author's webpage. He has a couple other series and a lot of other books going on. He does some continuation stuff. I think he does some short story stuff as well in this book series. So be sure to check that out. Also check out the rest of my channel. I do a lot of the book series or something that I cover occasionally. Like I said, I covered a book series called The Ranger's Apprentice previously. That's the other really big book series that I covered. I will cover Tamora Pierce. I have covered her Circle of Magic quartet and her Circle Opens quartet already. Otherwise, I do a lot of children's books, a lot of children's picture books, various different family films, and some educational stuff. So be sure to like and subscribe and check out the rest of my channel. Thank you.